She said, I'm Heidi Siena. I am the Vice President of Sales for Financial Services, and I'm here with Michael Lacorazza, the Chief Marketing Officer for US Bank. We thought today, what do you think about this, is just to talk about the marketing trends as we head into 2026. Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. Guess what everybody's talking about? AI. Let's start with that. The topic on everyone's mind: how do you see AI, including the use of synthetic audiences, enhancing US Bank's marketing strategy in 2026?
Yeah, so our team has various use cases of AI in different stages of development, and one of them that's maybe a little bit more advanced. For the last couple of years, we've been using synthetic audiences, proxies for the target audiences that we're going after,
Right.
to accelerate the development of our strategies and our creative. And it's kind of a game changer for us.
What's been the biggest learning from doing all that?
Well, a couple of things. One was we were incredibly surprised how fast it could change the trajectory of some of the prior activities that we did. So, for example, if you wanted to do a competitive analysis scan, we can do that, in a matter of a couple of days, which might have previously taken weeks.
And then, okay, so talk more about that. So the competitive analysis stand, what insights does it give you? Like, tell us everything.
Yeah, so if you wanted to say for your category and your competitors, what are the key messages in the marketplace? What's resonating against which audience profile and why, as a foundation for building a creative strategy.
Right.
You can use that as their starting point. And then as you develop ideas, you can feed those ideas into the synthetic audience profiles to get a reaction to how well they would resonate.
So now also consumers are still craving that authentic connection, the authentic human connections. Yeah. How do you ensure that the marketing remains emotionally resonant and trustworthy?
It still starts and begins with your end customer and understanding their needs, how they make decisions, what's important to them. And we're not in a place where we're turning over the development of the ideas or the content or the outcomes, if you will, to an AI engine to make those calls. Like, it has to be in our mind, right? At least right now, it's humans making the work, humans making the calls about what will resonate with humans.
What do you think, like, with the synthetic audiences, with what you've been doing, what has been, I guess, maybe the most surprising thing too?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of surprises along the way. I think the first piece was around when you do have, or was testing it in, we kind of benchmarked it versus actual focus groups to get a sense of where there were differences. And we found initially, the gap was a little wider. And then we got that learning, and then we're able to adjust that back into the model. And we got to the point where it's kind of about 95% overlap between what an actual human audience would say versus what the synthetic audience would say.
Wow. So what was that? Like, what they said? Like, what is an example?
Well, yeah, it'd be something like you have a particular idea that's leaning into convenience, or doing something really fast, and the synthetic responder might say, hey, that's pretty fantastic, and here's why. And then when there was a gap, the human might say, well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? My real world situation is a little bit different. I expect to be able to move larger amounts of money, as an example, as a nuance. And so we had to train some of those nuances to get them to be more real world.
So then you talked about money, and that lets me go to, like, the idea of privacy and measurement, just because that's a very private topic. So with privacy personalization, it's growing among consumers. And how are you balancing that personalized marketing with the transparency and consent?
For sure. And doing what we do, we have enormous amounts of data about our customers and very high expectations for what it takes to keep and earn the trust and what we will do with the data. I think the first thing is that we are are very active and focused on being clear and transparent on the permissioning of how we're using our clients' data and what value that provides for them in return when we are making decisions around offering new products, next best action. The second piece is that our team is skating to where the puck's going, and so we're delivering our own systems and evolving them in terms of permissioning, opt-ins, and so forth that are beyond what current regulations call for, because we're anticipating that that expectation will ratchet up higher.
Okay, that's great. I liked how you used the skating where the puck's going as a fellow hockey
I,
player.
I got that from you, yeah.
How does U.S. Bank ensure marketing outcomes are tied to business results across all channels?
Yeah, well, it starts with having radical alignment with your business partners. So for us, we're serving all the major business units in marketing. So it's consumer, it's small business, it's corporate, institutional, it's wealth, and we're incredibly clear and transparent about how we're investing the resources, the precious shareholder resources,
Right.
what we expect to get in return, how does this align to the business outcomes that they're on the hook for, and we sign up for aligned goals for what we're going to produce versus what they're going to produce. So the alignment piece is just the foundational element that has to happen.
Yeah.
And if you ever have that misalignment, then it's a recipe for disaster. The second thing is, for all of the work that our teams do across our business lines and with our brand, that work is planned together. So if you look at, say, the media plan for our brand work and the media plan for our consumer, they're built to pay off each other. They're built to provide lift. And so what we find for things like, say, in our media mix model, our brand investments are providing 15% or so lift into our product campaigns because of the synergy for how they're planned.
Right. And you mentioned the media mix modeling. How do you what is with the media mix modeling? Like, how have you figured out that is the right method to make sure the right method, I should say?
There is no one right method, is what I found in this, right? It's a composite set of tools. The media mix model plays a particular role, particularly for the type of media delivery that's not deterministic, where you can't see the connection between the exposure and the behavior being taken. But we also have multi-touch attribution. We also have last touch attribution. We also have constant levels of experiments, channels on, channels off, markets off, markets off, to fuel our learning. And I think what we're finding is, with the fragmentation of the data, the lack of transparency, or even access to data that you have in walled gardens and so forth, it's actually getting harder to do this, not easier, despite all of the tools and technology and providers and potential choices that you have to help you do this measurement. It's actually more difficult. And what it's led to for us is much more emphasis on understanding the nature and the signals from our first party data versus what we can observe outside of that.
So when you test new mediums with the media mix modeling, the MTA, like when you're testing new mediums, what are you mainly looking at?
Well, it depends on the nature of the investment and what it's for.
Okay.
I'd say for a product marketing campaigns, we're looking at ultimately what kind of business outcomes do we get? Do we get more new accounts? Do we get balances? How efficiently? What was the acquisition cost for, say, a new customer? Mm-hmm. And then for platforms that maybe carry a little bit of higher risk, some of the social platforms where it's like really user-generated centric content, which in some circumstances can be toxic and so forth. Like, we're looking for, I guess, signals that make it clear that it's the right environment for us to be in for the brand. Because if you don't quite do that right, then it can blow up. Right.
Now I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to ask you how you're using micro-influencers or niche creators in marketing campaigns, and what advantage do you see over traditional celebrity endorsements?
So we do have some work happening with micro-influencers. and we do some work with celebrities as well, but it's maybe maybe less visible than maybe what some other brands have done. Let's say a few things about that. The first is if you just take a step back and think about how people are making decisions, particularly Gen Z and so forth, and how they're engaging in even with each other in their lives on platforms. Micro influencers have become a much more prominent source of information that they trust. They have less trust for institutions and maybe kind of historical sources of information. I mean, many folks will trust what an Instagram influencer says more than what their doctor says on medical advice, which to me is kind of crazy, but it's true, right? We have this discussion in our household all the time. So recognizing how people are framing their decisions up and making decisions and being influenced has shifted so radically. I think for brands, it means you have to find a way to be in those environments in an authentic way for you, with the right sort of influencers that can help accelerate, augment your storytelling, and create engagement. And what we're finding is that when it does come from a more authentic place with a micro influencer that has an audience profile that audience really trusts, it has more impact than say trying to do something that's just pure mass market.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with financial services, we deal with a lot of compliance and legal. How do you work? How do you decide who the micro influencer is first? Obviously with your audience and authenticity, but then how do you ensure that they can reach all or they can meet all those standards?
Yeah, that's always really tricky. I think at the end of the day, it becomes a judgment call in terms of understanding the history of that influencer, the kind of content that they produce, the kind of image that they have. There can always be situations where it comes out with unintended consequences. I mean, just look at what's happened in some of the celebrity endorsements, right? It can happen there too. So no system is perfect, but I think our team does a pretty fantastic job of sort of vetting the profiles, and we share that insight and that analysis with our risk partners and get their input too.
Well, yeah, it's just always a question I have because there's so many.
Yeah, it's more art than science.
Right,
I think.
Right, which is always good to hear because there's so much of media that's science, like we were talking about in measurement, that it's nice to hear the art is still a part of it. Okay, I'm going to now switch to audio. Podcasts and audio are increasingly influential and offer a lot of incremental reach to other mediums. How do you incorporate the audio channel into your marketing mix, and are there examples you can talk about?
Yeah, one example that we have in market right now, which is doing really well for us and super interesting, is with Nicole Lappin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's a financial journalist. She has her own financial brand, if you will, that kind of comes at the world from a lot of different angles.
So very contextually relevant.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So we're working really closely with her team in the podcast space and how our brand's incorporated, and it's doing really well.
And then are you testing that on media mix modeling?
Yeah, audio is one of the more challenging, as I say, where data gaps are, because ads are skippable and so forth. But yeah, we are. That is something that will go in our media mix model for sure.
All right, you ready for some rapid fire?
Sure.
All right, let's talk about a couple trends.
Yeah.
Sports 2026. Yeah. Amidst the World Cup and the Olympics, how does U.S. Bank approach these opportunities?
Yeah, when you think about the changes in the media landscape and behaviors for people doing streaming, the way they consume content, sports may be the last live community shared opportunity that exists, right? It's huge, and you see the value there that has come through in terms of cost of media and advertising, cost to the media platforms for acquiring the rights. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's incredible what's being paid for, right, for these sports, and then the influx of private equity dollars to own sports teams, to own sports properties. it's pretty clear to me that there's a lot of value there. So
Well, I was talking recently about the idea of, do you remember appointment television? Like everybody watched Cheers at 9 o'clock on Thursday, and the next morning they were talking about the show. I feel like sports is the last like real.
it is.
Yeah.
It is, and even within sports, there's a loss of the live piece too because of the social media platforms and the distribution of clips and so forth. So one of the things, I have a teenage son, and one of the things that we do together is watch live sports. We're both kind of really into a lot of different things, and we talk about it and we text about it and so forth. And we'll have a conversation, and he'll talk about a particular moment that happened, a great catch or something. I said, "Oh, did you see that?" And he's like, "No." But the clip came through in his social media feed and he commented on it or whatever. So for his generation, it's like they were there or they just experienced some of the highlights, even though they didn't actually watch it.
Isn't that crazy? Like that's how they're consuming media.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These really short form pieces.
Right. And the attention span.
Yeah.
Like what?
I think it's kind of dangerous, to be honest. A
As,
lot of things I don't like about it, but it is what it is.
As somebody with 4 children at home, that is how they consume media and watch whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's very concerning. Okay, streaming and social commerce, shoppable experiences. This is a rapid fire, remember, about a marketing trend. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, a great example of where that's come to life is for a company like, I don't want to necessarily mention names, but something like Flow Code, where you see these ads for merchandise from the NFL and people are using QR codes on their televisions to shop.
Right.
And that didn't really used to happen. If there was a time when people thought QR codes were dead and they didn't really have any need in the world, right?
And they're back.
They're back. and you can see that sort of stimulus, if you will, towards action evolving into something much deeper.
Right. All right, next trend. Conversational ads as a part of your future strategy.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I was going with that point, which is one thing that could be, I think, is really, really interesting opportunity. And we're looking at it, and we may not get there first, and that's okay if we don't. But imagine if, you have an ad exposure where instead of just seeing the ad, experiencing your video or seeing a URL, that it's actually an LLM type of conversation with the brand.
Uh-huh.
And so you have this like live interaction, but they're not having to go to your website to use a chat bot, or
Right.
it just becomes part of the experience, and it becomes some proxy for representing your brand and being able to answer questions.
Have you thought about what U.S. banks would look like?
We're starting to. I think we'd probably because of the the risk profile and goes along
Right.
this, it would probably begin with something that's more self-contained around advice that we can scale. But yeah,
like almost advice, like financial advice.
Yeah.
in a right
something
way.
simple.
Mm-hmm. All right, next trend. Compound creativity and long-term return for brands rather than one-off campaigns.
Yeah. Well, when you think about, name any of the great brands that you can imagine, Nike, Apple, and so forth.
Right.
One of the things that many of them have in common is that they've had over the years durable ideas that resonate.
Yeah.
And they invested in them billions of dollars over time to accrue greater levels of equity and value. And so, from my perspective, if you're a brand that can find that for you, and in our case, 2 years ago we launched the Power of Us idea, and we love it. Our teams love it. It's working. That those kinds of themes, and as you invest in them, can become more durable. And oftentimes what you find is when brands are in distress, they're constantly changing. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out how to explain who they are.
Right.
And the business is in decline, margins, revenue, et cetera. And then you kind of go, well, I thought that was this brand, but I'm not really sure what they are. So there's that. And then I guess the second piece is what I found over the years is that brands tend to get tired of their own work before the customer does, right?
Ah,
So,
some insight.
you always just have this sort of like, what's the calculation for wear in and wear out and so forth. And we're always like, oh my God, it seems like it's been out there forever. But
Because you were working on it
because-
2 years
yeah,
before
right.
we saw it.
right, because we have our bias, right? The exposure bias. But I think if you see some of the work that's out there for big brands and sports and so forth, some of the most successful brands are they're sticking with it, and they're continuing to run the same work day in, day out.
Well, because it builds a conversation. I mean,
Yeah.
it really does. And it takes, I mean, what is it now? I mean, nowadays it's probably even longer than 6 months for them to really capture it and understand and associate it with the brand.
It's a lot of work.
What has been, so talking about the power of us, what's been your most proud moment of that campaign?
I think the most pride that the team felt was from the internal reaction to the work. So as much as we measure the impact, breakthrough in sales, our media mix model can tell us the economic value of it, which is pretty phenomenal. We're getting, upwards of 4 times the return on our investment in profitability from the investment. But as soon as it launched, the conversations that we're having inside of our 70,000 person conversation about how they were seen in the work and how it represented us so well, and it got them excited and felt like they were part of something bigger was actually the most amazing part of it all.
It was a validation for all the work that they've been doing.
Yeah.
That is really incredible. All right, last question. Looking ahead, what marketing innovation or trend that US Bank wants to lead in 2026?
One of the areas I think that our team is ahead on probably in most versus most brands is GEO, or search generated from LLMs.
Yeah.
Our team's done a tremendous job really leaning in to understand the mechanics of how that works.
Right.
And put specific actions in place to elevate our results and so forth. And also understanding that just like regular SEO, things are going to change. You have to adapt. You've got to make adjustments. But we've already seen, since the team started working on this, some pretty step change improvements in our in rankings for the things that are important to us.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Michael, for your time.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. It's also great to hear all the marketing trends for 2026.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.